an Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Clariel, chapters 26, 27, 28, 29, and 30. The path is chosen, into the waterfall, binding the free, once were dragons, and an ancient treasure. In these chapters, Clariel does the narratively interesting thing. I'll give her that. But not the smart thing. This whole set of chapters is me going, oh, baby, what is you doing? Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you very much to Yama, who is in the chat, for commissioning this episode. Y'all, but what is she doing, though? Now, look, I'm not mad at her for this solely because I want her to do it. You know, like I said this last episode, I want to see what happens. I want to know what all it looks like if you choose the left-hand path, as they say, and you really have the power to do it. The thing with Clariel is whether she has the power to do it is the question. Because she has raw ability, but she hasn't got the knowledge. And so what we have all throughout these chapters is Mogget saying a thing to her and her having to decide whether or not to believe Mogget. That's no way to move forward when you're choosing things that are this drastic. You can't be depending on the word of someone who has a vested interest in your choice for the information. And that's where I think she has gone wrong here. Not even choosing to follow free magic and doing something this extreme, even though I do think that's a bad idea. That aside, God, I really am a fucking broken record though, aren't I? Because I'm about to say, research it. You don't need to leave this second. I know it feels like you do, but I promise you, taking an extra several hours to ask some questions, find some books, which I'm sure you could ask the sendings for, and they wouldn't even fucking question you. I mean, she went to the library. We saw that she's basically given anything that she's interested in. By the way, I don't think I mentioned that the sending that goes up to the shelves for her like scuttles up the sides of the shelves like a spider, and I am not here for that at all. There's something like so unnerving about a humanoid body being like designed to move that way. And I get that that's probably just the most practical way to have, but no, I don't think so at all. No, especially because like when I picture a library, especially in a fucking castle like this, I picture a place that I want to spend my evenings, my dusks, my rosy twilights with the fireplace going and the glass of port and the sun setting. And then to see a fucking shape like that scuttling up at the corner of my eye. Oh my God. Not okay. That's a nightmare. Christ. Oh my God. Yama just said The Exorcist. I didn't even think of that, but that's 100% what it is. You're right. Ugh. I hate it. But anyway, so we've already seen that Clariel has so much information at her disposal if she would just have the patience to use it. And she almost does it because she thinks to herself about how doing something isn't always the right thing, that even in hunting, which is like her favorite thing, there are times where you just need to hold the fuck still. I mean, she comes so close. Granted, I don't recommend that she be like me, where I am simply overthinking things until I'm paralyzed into total inaction. That's no good either. But give yourself half a day, maybe not even half a day. Like I said, 6 hours. And find out who the fuck Mogget is. Which I understand being like, I can't ask too many questions or people are going to start to like twig to what's going on or get suspicious. But I feel like you've been spending a fair amount of time with Mogget. You asking somebody who the hell Mogget is and what the deal is with Mogget wouldn't seem out of place. I feel like this is the kind of thing that would feel like naturally you are intended to be spending like months here. This animal is going to be around. It can talk. I think they would forgive you for asking what the fuck is going on with it. So, because like it's such a fucking red flag that it's not until they have like gotten out of there and everything has really gone down that she then finds out Mogget is like more powerful than these other two that she let free. She should know that before she chooses to do all of this, but she's just finding out really fucking important information like that as they're going along. Not good, Clariel. Like, and honestly, I have to say, I'm really admiring Garth Nix for this because he is being consistent as fuck with her character. This girl is impetuous. This girl almost abandoned Belle in the fucking middle of nowhere because she just wanted to go to the woods. I can't even be like mad at this because she is absolutely on brand this whole time. So that's mainly the thing for me is like, this author has established there's nothing worse than watching a character do some stupid shit. And you feel like, why are you doing this? I don't get it. It's a different thing to watch them do some stupid shit and be like, yep, you would. Fucking idiot. Like, he has gotten us to know her and I believe it. And even though she's not asking the questions she has shown a remarkable lack of curiosity about a lot of things in her world. Like, the whole thing with magic and just not really, it's more than just not having like the innate ability to do magic. It's about the fact that she isn't awed by it. There's nothing about it that's like drawing her in at all. For me, it's not even so much about the ability to do things. It's wanting to know how that works, wanting to understand like the functionality behind it. I would want to know. And she doesn't seem interested. She's just so practical minded and so in the moment. And she's just like, she's got to be a ground sign of some. She's probably a fucking Taurus. And so, yeah, this whole thing is just her getting led around by the nose by Mogget, who knows precisely how to play her. And he keeps low key, like pushing her. And she keeps acting like, I see what you're doing and I'm not falling for it. But you figure, you see what he's doing in quotes after it's done. You don't notice the first 2 steps that he pushed you along. And then you're like, I'm not taking that third step because I can see what you've already taken 2 steps. Sorry, girl. Too late. You know, like, oh man, this is hard to read, but also really interesting. You know, this is a thing that I say all the time. You have these expectations without knowing that you have them, right? You read a thing, there's just a way certain stories go, and you don't even realize that you expect a story to go a certain way until it doesn't. And then all of a sudden you're like, word? Oh, we're doing this. Shit, okay, I'm paying attention now. And that's really what it is I'm paying attention now. You can go so sort of into this like autopilot with certain stories, which is not a bad thing necessarily. Like, there are some stories with which you go to these stories for the autopilot. You come for the predictability of it because it's a comfort and there is a familiarity. But in something like this, when it's a fantasy and there is so much world at the character's disposal that we haven't seen yet, it feels like a lot more of a shame to do the familiar, comfortable, predictable thing, because you have so much more to work with than a story set in our universe, you know? When I say predictable stories that I like, I'm talking about like murder mysteries, you know? Like I'm reading like the Miss Phryne Fisher mysteries, and she always winds up beating the hell out of whoever tried to come at her, figuring out who the murderer is and saving the day every time. Great. That's what I'm here for. I want that. But she's also living in 1920s Australia in our universe. And I know that there are just limitations societally and in terms of like the timeline that you have to stay within. You don't have that in a fantasy world. You can do whatever you want as long as it's playing by the rules that you've decided to set up. So when you have that kind of expansive world map and possibilities of magic and all of these like different things that you have come across in other books, because this is what, the 5th one? I'm trying to remember how many there have been. I feel like if she had taken the smarter path and chosen not to fall for Mogget's shit, on the one hand, I'd be like, good for you. Mogget is not to be trusted. On the other hand, I'm like, oh man, but I really wanted to see that though. And so I'm glad that she's deciding to do this. Now we're getting into some real shit though, because guys, is this bitch Clora of the Mask? Is that what we're doing? Is that who she is? Are we seeing the creation of an old enemy? I'm worried. I'm concerned. I really again, I have such mixed feelings on this, because as much as Clariel is impetuous and makes bad decisions, I get her and I like her. Despite all that, she's a mess. It's fine. I still like her. I don't want her to wind up there. But if that's what this is, that's kind of a dope fucking thing to do. We're not doing it's the origin story of Clora the Mask. We aren't told that, unless maybe people were. Maybe if there was buzz around this book before it came out, people did know. But for me, if that is what this is, I have no idea. And finding out as we go that that might be what's happening here, that's pretty fucking good. That's pretty interesting. Clora is like a great character to do that with too, because she's just so strange, you know? The first chapters of Clariel, we meet her and she's presented as being extremely she's nothing to fuck with, and yet gets subjugated. And despite being subjugated by a greater power, is still nothing to fuck with. So we know how powerful she can be. And also, we know how long she hangs around for. And it changes retroactively her death. I feel like she gets sent to death, right? Like permanently. I'm trying to remember how things go down with Clora, because now I'm forgetting. But what I'm saying is, it's easy to be like, haha, we beat you, when you're just like, yeah, this is a bad guy. But if we find out who Clora actually is and was, and the circumstances surrounding how she became what she did, there's a real bittersweet quality to her death of yeah, we beat the enemy, Also, though, she had been like a person at one point whom we all understood. And that maybe sending her into death is a kindness, a relief. There might have been a part of her that was like a little bit longing for release from this, you know? That said, you can't exactly avoid going into death the way that Clore did unless you really reject death like wholeheartedly, right? So maybe there wasn't a part of her that longed. All of this is, you know, operating under the assumption that that is indeed who Clariel is. And I could see Clariel, if something is going to happen to her, her name, Claire, like if it's Clore of the Mask, I could see Clariel morphing into Clore eventually, like that being a name that winds up sort of overtaking her original name. But anyway, okay, so I'm getting ahead of myself here. So Mogget comes up to her and tells her, because she's, you know, agreed to meet him and talk about what the hell the plan is here. I am a great believer that anything not expressly forbidden is explicitly allowed, said Mogget, which has been highlighted, according to Kindle, by 226 people. I mean, we already knew that Mogget was a Slytherin, but that is like the Slytheriniest quote. I don't feel like I have ever found a single sentence that summarizes who Slytherins are better than that. And it's not even a bad thing, because there is a piece of me that's like, yeah, I mean, if you didn't want them to not do it, you should have worded that shit better. So I can be a little bit of a lawyer about stuff too, and I kind of get it. At the same time, how about some morality? But, you know, that's so subjective. So he asks her what the parameters are regarding her imprisonment. And Clariel says that he told the Sendings, I should be treated as his granddaughter and guarded, but not to be allowed to cross the bridge, step into a boat, or a paperwing. The Sendings are very literal, said Mogget. Not allowed to cross the bridge, use a boat, or paperwing. That was rather lax. I suppose I shouldn't be surprised at his ignorance. And then he tells her to follow him. And they go, first there's this moment where she sees the Book of the Dead, and she kind of feels it like watching her as they're, you know, standing near it, like it's alive somehow. And she thinks that being an Abhorsen, like a family member, it should be that okay for her to read it, because Mogget tells her just to leave it alone. And he's like, no, just being part of the family. You have to be the Abhorsen, or have to be the Abhorsen in waiting. Either one of those things, but otherwise, nah. And she says, Bell told me he read it, and he thought Yanael hadn't. Maybe even Tyrael had never read it. And Mogget just goes, like I said. And Clariel's like, what? And I'm like, bitch, what do you mean what? Bell's the fucking Abhorsen in waiting. Come on. We all know it. You know it. They know it. We all know it. So I love this moment of him being like, wow, it's a nice bottle of ink you got there. Be a shame if somebody were to, I don't know, tip it over and make sure that the Sending had to go and get some rags to clean it up, huh? I didn't fucking catch on to what he was doing right away. And when he's like, be very careful you don't spill the ink, I was like, is it poison ink? Like, what are you talking about? And then I was suddenly like, oh, okay. And then she sends off the Sending for this cloth, and he says, do you still want to escape? And she says, I do. However, I want that bottle that we brought. And Mogget is like, oh, I fucking knew it. Yes, I could smell it on you. And he asks if she got the creature's name, and she says Azimanil, and Mogget's eyes get real big. He has a very specific reaction that to me feels like he's fucking knows who this is, and it's a particularly good creature to have in this position. There's something about it that I'm just like, I can see him rubbing his hands together and be like, yeah. And I love at one point she says something about she, and he stops her and says, she? Oh, Azimanil is clever. And I was like, what is that? Again, that is a really fucking intriguing thing to say, and Clariel doesn't ask him about it because she's just so focused on getting out of here that stuff that should be drawing her attention in some way, she's not even fucking hearing it. And I'm just like, what are you doing, girl? Do you fucking hear the words he's saying? Like, that thing is likely not female. It's probably telling you that it's female because it can sense that you would trust it more if it were. Something like that. It is using your psychology against you. So he tells her, there are more ways to leave this house than you think, and there's only one way for you to leave that offers a chance of success, and it requires the assistance of a free magic creature. And she tells him about like forcing Azimanil to her will, and she says, so I let her go. And Mogget says, you let her go. Let her go. Which I think is an indication that Mogget thinks Azimanil knows, like, got a sense of Clariel right away, chose to say it was female, and let Clariel think that she was still in control because the way that he keeps repeating, let her go, there's just a vibe to it of him being like, oh, you let her, huh? Mm-hmm. No, she let you not be eviscerated is what happened, but sure, honey. And I mean, that's pretty much the theme of the next 4 chapters is we're going to pretend she's in charge and let her think she's got the power. And she technically does, but she doesn't really. She has to ask them every step of the way, what should I do now? Well, is that a good idea? What about this? What do you think? Over and over again. She hasn't got a clue what she's doing. So let's see. He says, Azimanil is below where the Abhorsons take their captives. She ought to be sunk deeper still, but the sendings only take the prisoners so far. Tyrael should have finished the job, put the bottle out with the rest, but he shirked it as so much else. I love this detail, too, that Tyrael had a responsibility to put this out of the reach of Clariel and was specifically told about it, and even, like, sort of like hints to Clariel that he knows, and he still didn't take the steps that he should have taken. He's just so, like, not fucking focused on his shit at all. And Mogget talks about going out through this waterfall and how it is a very, we know from previous books, a lot of free magic creatures or undead cannot cross water, but some can if they are strong enough. And that is going to be the major obstacle here, is that she's going to need more than one of these creatures to get her through. So here's when things begin to like get interesting. Mogget is starting to tell her how shit's going to work, and his collar begins to react to the shit that he's saying. I find this extremely interesting because I said earlier this book that Mogget has been more polite to Clariel than he has to anybody in the previous books. And I'm realizing now that's by design. He sensed immediately that she was going to be useful and that he should try to befriend her. And also, in terms of lying, we have never really seen him try to do it before, I don't think. And I have to imagine that is because after this little fucking stunt, he gets slapped down pretty hard and isn't able to bend the rules as much as he is right now. So I think that's also part of him being a lot saltier in later books, is that he has tried and tried and tried to get out, and he just isn't managing it. And he's finally realizing that he just kind of has to resign himself to his fate. So I love these little character developments. I really do. So then she asks him, he says, you have the power to command them fueled by your rage. And Clariel says, only for a short time. What happens afterward when I am weak? Have them swear when you first hold them in your sway. You can fix them then, make them serve you no matter whether you are weak or not, awake or not, unconscious. There is no way they can turn against me? Asked Clariel. Any bond will weaken over time, said Mogget, but it can be made anew. I've always heard it said that free magic creatures are inimical to life. What does that mean? Mogget did not answer immediately, choosing instead to lick one of his paws with intense interest. Then he says, that's an exaggeration, and then sort of like twists his neck like his collar is kind of uncomfortable all of a sudden. And I love that how like slowly this begins, because as it continues, as Mogget keeps pushing the envelope of what he can say, the fucking collar is getting feisty with him. It's like there's a point at which it almost seems like he's given an electric shock. There are times where it's just all of a sudden charter marks begin to glow on it that weren't visible before. There's just a lot of different like levels of lie that he's able to get away with here. So Clariel says, if the like free magic's creatures, their touch is corrosive. So how are they going to be able to take me anywhere? And Mogget says the swift water will lessen the effect. Lessen? Asked Clariel. That doesn't sound very good. Is there anything else I can do? I remember Cargrin said something about the Abhorsen having special robes. Again, Mogget was slow to answer. It looked to Clariel as if he was struggling with the desire not to answer at all, or perhaps to lie. Even though he was a cat, she'd seen merchants behave similarly, shifting where they looked, hunching their shoulders, even nervously clawing at their collars, as Mogget was doing. There are garments, robes, masks, and such like that provide protection for a time, said Mogget, for when the Abhorsens used to deal more closely with their prisoners. There should be some such stuff below. Old, but serviceable. I presume you would not be able to renew the marks within them. Once put in use, they will fail at the next full moon. And Mogget keeps explaining to her about free magic and the way that it's used by force of will. I'm not even disappointed. That's not the word. But I can't think of another suitable word. I had been sort of hoping, I think, that we would find out that free magic is misunderstood, because the thing is, it's called free magic, and the connotations of the word free are almost always positive. It's something that is not constrained. It is something that has the ability to be put towards a more creative use than something that is more structured. Maybe being able to put to a use that is outside of the possibilities that were available to the people who created the charter. So maybe somebody with more vision would be able to do something different and cool with it. But this book really is hammering home, for me at least, more than others, that free magic is there's a sort of suggestion here that it's like a cloud with lightning striking randomly, and the charter is like wires. So you've got one, and it's not like it's evil. It's more like it's just so completely wild and out of control that you're almost definitely going to die. Like, you can maybe harness it here and there, and you could even do it for a time, but most people aren't going to be able to do anything with it. And if they can, it's going to burn them up. And free magic, or that's free magic, and then charter magic is wrapped in insulation. Like the charter symbols and the accoutrement of like the objects and everything serve as a sort of buffer between the people using it and the live energy of the magic itself. I have just such an instinctive dislike of not being permitted access to the direct power itself and being told that a system that's already in place is the way to go. And I think that's really why, for me, I was kind of hoping we would find out more about free magic being misunderstood, because throughout history, being told to do things according to the systems in place already has often been a way of keeping people compliant, of squashing new ideas that threaten the status quo, etc., etc. So I think I was like without realizing it, looking for a subplot where it turned out that maybe some of the people who had created charters, and I don't know enough about how that worked, but maybe some of them were either corrupt or very limited at the very least, and that we would find out maybe the charter isn't everything it's cracked up to be, and that free magic has its place. But it doesn't seem like that's the way it's going to go. Free magic appears to just be kind of it's not even inimical to life. You know what? Inimical I always think of as being, a word that means just in direct conflict with. But I'm realizing that I have never looked it up, so let's make sure. Tending to obstruct or harm. Harmful, injurious, detrimental. Okay, so basically what I thought. Is it just too much? Inimical to life and evil aren't necessarily the same thing, It's just, I don't know. I'm just so hung up on this. But anyway, she asks Mogget what it is that he wants. And Mogget says freedom from my enslavement. And she's like, I don't know about that, buddy. And he says something about how, I'm a slave. You don't think that's a fucked up thing to do? And she's like, I mean, if you were a human being, I'd probably feel differently about this. But I don't know about you and what you did and all of this. And he says reasons can always be found to bind a slave, which, I mean, look, he's not wrong, but there's always you're also trying to say that with this tone as if to suggest they trumped some charges up against you. Maybe sometimes the reasons are valid. Just saying, and when he says slave, the connotations of the word slave make it sound as if he's being exploited for labor. And I don't know if he is or not. We don't really see much about his day-to-day life in this household, but I don't get the impression that's how it works. So really, prisoner feels more appropriate than slave. And I think he's very purposefully choosing the word slave in order to strike a particular nerve with her. So he writes to her because the sending comes back. You must act soon in case Tyrael does recall his duty and puts Zimanil under the waterfall. Tonight is best at midnight. I wanted her so much to push back against this. Like, he's dictating everything to her. I will distract sendings first and meet you in kitchen store. We go down from there. So he gets down from her lap and goes off, and she's sitting there and decides that she's going to write a note to Belle. I really love this. Like, if she is Clore of the Mask, I'm not sure how much difference this is actually going to make. But I like it in terms of a device to keep Clariel grounded enough within the, like, community of people that she has gotten to know and, like, you know, allegedly care about, that this note shows that despite the fact that she's making this choice, there's still like a part of her that kind of knows this isn't a good idea. That's the way I see this note, is like her soul admission that maybe Belle deserves better. Maybe everyone deserves better. I don't know. I just really liked this. And I really like the fact that Mogget is a little bit pissed at her later, because obviously he didn't predict this. And I like that too, because Mogget's got this whole thing, like he's fucking sized her up the second he saw her and knows all about what she is. And there are still things here and there apparently that he doesn't know about her. She can surprise him. And I appreciate him being thrown off a little bit here and there, because he's too big for his britches anyway. We all know he's too big for his collar. Yama says he is forbidden to do some stuff and he's forced to serve the family. So it's well, that's my question. Yama, forced to serve the family. How so exactly? That was my question. If he's saying slavery and I was like, is he being exploited in some way? What is the service? Is it his just knowledge? Because Yama goes on to say he can't be himself or his true self. It's a kind of slavery. I would argue not being allowed to be your true self is still aligns with being a prisoner as much as being a slave to me. Being forced to serve, that's different. But I don't know a lot about what she says he tried to lie, but he can't. He needs to answer her. Yeah, I guess that's true. That's overpowering his free will. But of course, keeping him prisoner would also be overpowering his free will to leave. So that's also kind of part and parcel with being a prisoner. But that is like a different, it's not a physical limitation. It's a mental limitation in a way. Yeah, it's just like, it's kind of a gray area for me. So she writes this note to Belle. I'm going to release the free magic creature we fought on the islet. Is it islet? And with its help, escape from here and go to Belisare. There I hope to rescue my Aunt Lemon. If the creature proves powerful enough, I will use it to slay Kilp and Aranzo and end their rebellion. They are guilty of murder and treason and deserve no better. I almost bound the creature before on the islet, and I think is crossed out. I am sure I can do so again. Its name is a Ziminil. Mogget says there are special robes I can wear to avoid the corruption of flesh or whatever it is such creatures do. I don't suppose my actions will spur my grandfather into doing anything, but if I should fail, I call on you to do what you can for my Aunt Lemon and also to ensure justice is done. I am sorry I was cross with you today. You don't deserve it. Your friend. And I like that detail that she says, I want you to do what you can for my Aunt Lemon if I don't get to do it, and then finishes and ensure justice is done. Because that is really leaving herself wide open, which of course we as readers can see. She doesn't think that means anything about her when she's writing it. But chances are, the fact that she is saying, like, you know, I'm leaving it to you to ensure justice is done, and then running off with a couple of free magic creatures. Girl, apparently you have a very different idea of what justice looks like than what Belle does, and you don't seem aware of that at all. And she goes and tells the sending to give the note to Balatiel tomorrow. Not when he arrives, when he is about to leave. And, yeah. Clariel. She felt two conflicting emotions. One was all excitement to finally do something, but then there was another small voice that warned that she might be doing something stupid, that it was not always better to do something than nothing. Hunting sometimes required stillness and waiting. But this small voice was no match for the excitement Clariel felt rising inside her. This is something that I've actually started to harness myself over the past few years. There are times where you really aren't sure what the right course of action is. And I mean that because sometimes we tell ourselves that we don't know the right course of action. And we just don't want to do it. So we just pretend that it was so hard to know. And I did the best I could. And it's like, yeah, you didn't though. But something that I wouldn't consider it lying to yourself so much as not really like being emotionally mature enough to know at the time. And I've started to be able to do it a little bit better. When I am considering something and I can't decide if it's a good or bad decision. This obviously, good or bad doesn't apply to lots of parts of our life. Things are very subjective, but there are some things that it's like, is this smart or not? Is this a good idea or not? And when something is not a good idea, maybe just irresponsible or hurtful or whatever, I get a little fluttering bit of doubt in the pit of my stomach. And the most common time that this will pop up, or at least in the past, has been spending money that I shouldn't. If I have a kind of sick feeling after I click checkout, after I walk away from the cash register and have my bag in my hand and I feel gross, I'm fucked up. And the thing is, when I was younger, I was never able to detect that sick feeling until it was a little too late. I could turn around and return a thing. It was embarrassing. You don't want to be like, oh, you know what? It's been 2 seconds, but I already know that was a bad plan. But now that I'm older, I have learned to detect the early signs of that feeling and have zeroed in on it a little bit better and been able to sort of, be more honest with myself when I'm feeling that way, that's probably an indication that my conscience or just my adult self versus my immediate gratification child self knows better. And that's what's going on here with Clariel. She's got that fluttery gut thing that's like, girl, no. But she's too young to have really figured out what it's going to feel like later and to try and head that off. She's acting like, I'm just going to do it and that feeling will go away. And that's not how that works. You just do it anyway. And then that feeling blooms and you feel like really actually kind of sick over it. So, Claire, it's the kind of thing I feel so much for parents in this sort of regard, parents and grandparents who are close to their grandchildren. Because moving here and getting involved romantically with Owen, who is several years younger than me, and getting involved with his friends, they are just younger enough that I can see them making the mistakes that I made. And there is absolutely no way to give a person advice on some things. They just have to live through it, and you just have to sit by and watch them fuck up. And you know that they're going to fuck up, and you know they're going to be heartbroken, and they're going to be so hurt. And there is just nothing to be done to prevent it. You just have to allow them to live their life and get hurt. And that's hard enough with people that I don't even like that much. But when it's somebody that's your child or a grandchild or a close friend or something like that, so much worse. So that's how I feel a lot when I like read YA stuff lately, is there are moments where I'm just like, man, if I could get into this book and slap and shake you and be like, what are you doing? It wouldn't matter, because this child, I remember what it was like. I felt my situation's different. I know it was like that with you, but it's not like that with me. And I know what I'm doing. I know him better than you know him. I know what she's like better than you know. I know how this is going to work out. And like really everybody thinks their situation is special, and it's almost never actually special. It's a depressing but true fact. Experience matters. It means something. So I just want to get in there and be like, Clariel, girl, that voice, that's your wisdom speaking. But she would never listen to me at all. So anyway, that's a big part of why I don't want to have a child, because I am a control freak, and I would ruin a kid's life by trying to stop them from doing anything that could hurt them. And that would mean that they weren't allowed to do anything, and it would be awful. So I'm just count me out. I don't need to put a child through that. So Clariel goes and like packs some things up. She is waiting for, the midnight like uproar, which certainly happens. There was a growing cloud of smoke billowing up toward her from the orchard, where 3 peach trees were alight from root to crown. I am dying to know what Mogget did to cause this. What exactly did he like? It surprises me he is able to do something this drastic at all. And I'm just super curious about that. So that is plenty of a fucking distraction. And they take off and head down into this, weird sort of prison area. And there's this moment where there's a door that Mogget isn't positive she's going to be able to open. And the door eventually does, because Clariel presses the charter mark and says, "Open in the name of Tyrael, my mother's father." And eventually it does, but it's doing it in this way that's like, I don't know about this though. And, by the end of these chapters, you can guarantee she leans her head against that door. That shit's not opening, because her charter that connection is fucked up. So she goes down there, and basically, to jump ahead a little bit, she overpowers Azimanil pretty quickly. She also finds the protective clothing and really takes her fucking time putting it all on and figuring it out. And Mogget is agitated. I am really curious what it is about. I'm going to assume, because Mogget's whole thing seems to be wanting her to be corrupted so that the charter so that her connection to it cannot be repaired. Because I would imagine her connection interferes with some of what these creatures can do. And probably also interferes a little bit with Mogget. And I'm guessing that these clothes, he was hoping to bully her into leaving them behind so that she was exposed in a way that she wouldn't be. But she doesn't totally listen to him and picks out exactly what she wants. It says, underneath the clothes there was a line of bronze masks, full face masks, which would fit under the chin and extend back to the ears, with narrow slits for the eyes covered in some clear crystal, and a hinged flap over the larger mouth hole. The masks had leather straps with bronze buckles. This sounds hideous and really kind of creepy, honestly. And she finally puts one of these on, and this begins to be a thing where it gets stuck to her face in a way that suggests that the masks are not as up to the task as maybe they had been at one time. I don't know. But yeah, she pulls the mask up. The mask felt even heavier on her face and repressive. But then charter magic tingled. The baptismal mark burned for a moment, and for a brief instant, Clariel felt herself dip into a great swath of the charter. The mask felt lighter and warmer thereafter. She hoped it meant that the protective magic was working, for she knew no way to wake it if it retired, or if it required some spell. I hate to tell you, girl. So she overpowers Azimanil, and it's pretty easy to do in a way that I assume, because of the way that Mogget's been talking about Azimanil, is orchestrated. I think there is more going on than fucking what Clariel thinks is going on. And as she overpowers it, there's a pain in Clariel's forehead, a reaction of the charter mark, where it's, seems to sense exactly what she's doing, and that is not part of the charter magic, and that is not working out. And she has her first temptation to use this power that she is suddenly getting access to. And it says, to become such a warrior that nothing could stand against her, and she would wade through her enemies, rending them limb from limb, laughing as they sought to flee. But she has got her fury a little bit more under control, and she doesn't give in to this feeling. So at this point, a bunch of warrior sendings begin to come down on her through this door. She drew upon Azimanil's power and, gesturing with one hand, directed a great blast of raw sorcery that struck the ceiling above the door and shattered the rock. Huge boulders came tumbling down to block the doorway, a cloud of dust bursting over Clariel and out beyond, only to be washed away by the waterfall. And Clariel's immediate reaction is to be like, well, that is fucking rad, and I love being able to do this. And then she has to sort of stop herself and be like, girl, you need to calm down. What are you doing? But she has to pick another creature. And Clariel is like, is there some sort of fucking is there a goddamn Excel sheet that I can look at to figure out who's who and to decide who I should choose? And Mogget's like, maybe there was, but it's, neglected and lost. And I'm like, is it? And he says, any of these bottles you'll be able to stand up against. So she goes and just picks a random thing, a random bottle. And she is almost overpowered herself by the next one. It seems like it's going to take her over, and then all of a sudden she is able to reassert herself in a way that because of the way Azimanil worked out, I can't necessarily buy that this was real. I can't help but wonder if this is all part, if it sees Mogget and it sees Azimanil and realizes it will be to my advantage to work with her. But I don't want to believe that. I want to believe that there is some power in her. It's just, she just doesn't have the ability that she thinks she has. So his name is Bazalanan. So many goddamn syllables, guys. So many A's. And eventually, the thing tries to make her submit. She overpowers it in response, but almost kills it instead of making it serve her. And Mogget has to remind her to take its submission, because that's what this whole thing is about. So eventually they carry her out of there. I'm trying to find, shaping themselves into two halves of a globe. Clariel staggered to her feet as they began to close around her and looked across to where she had left her sword on the floor. It was too late to fetch it now. Too late to change her mind. And I feel like that might also have been by design. Mogget, for his part, wasn't sure he'd be able to leave the house. But he thought maybe, because no Abhorsen had directly forbidden him to leave in such a long time. And it does seem as if there's like, it wears away. And once he tries, it appears he can go. And he's like a little surprised, but, obviously very happy about it. And we have like, I'm running out of time here, so I'll kind of like speed through this. But we have some travel like moments between them all where the two creatures bond together. It's like the crystal gems becoming a fusion, and they turn into like this like weird dragon with a chair on it that she can ride in like it's a throne. And it sounds really, really fucking cool, but apparently is like not comfortable and doesn't feel safe. And Clariel doesn't like it, and she can't relax the way that she had been. Like in the Paper Wing, she could fucking sleep while that thing was going, and she can't do that in this thing. So yeah, the whole thing is just really, and as everything continues to go along, she finds out more and more about how much Mogget didn't tell her or misrepresented about, like, because she's saying something about how the charter marks are fading away, that things feel wrong. And he's like, yeah, well, you're dealing with free magic. That's going to happen. And she's like, you didn't say that. And he's like, I thought you knew. And I'm like, you didn't think she knew. You counted on the fact that she did not know, actually. And there is this mask growing more and more a part of her as this continues. It is at first just hard to get off. And it's like, your face is so sensitive that the idea of the mask being difficult to, like it being almost glued to her, is a nightmare to me. That sounds so horrifying. She tried to take the mask off. It was stuck fast and wouldn't move. She thought it was dried blood. She splashed water, but it still wouldn't move, and she began to grow afraid. She plunged her head into the river, into the fast-running water, holding her breath until at last it came free with a sickening pang in her forehead. Which, yeah, that is the water is at work there, because that water washes away this kind of thing. But it's not like the water itself. It's the magic of it, not the physicality of the water. Meanwhile, back at the castle, fucking Belle finds out what has been going on. And poor Belle, he can't believe that she just did that shit. He was told to keep the bottle away from her, not let her touch it. There had been warnings, but you can tell he didn't really think it was true. He clearly thought Cargrim was kind of being paranoid or underestimating Clariel. And he's like genuinely starting to cry once he figures out what's happening. And not only did she take the one that Cargrim warned him about, but she freed another one. And that is just like, the gravity of this is so intense. And he tells the sendings finally, because he's like wondering whether they're going to listen to him. He says, bring me the sword cleave and a set of bells. And then all of a sudden, all of these sendings kneel. And it says, Balatiel felt the hair stand up on the back of his neck, and from somewhere deep beneath his feet, he thought he heard the sound, the distant echo of a sorrowful bell. And Clariel doesn't hear it. But Mogget senses when this happens, and way away, sort of sits up and looks around and is like, huh. Like he knew it was coming, but he didn't think it was going to happen this quick. I think Mogget maybe underestimated Clariel's importance to Belle. I think that he was joking around with Clariel about Belle being her lover to see her reaction and realized pretty quickly, like, oh no, she doesn't see him that way. But I don't think he realized Belle does kind of see her that way and is going to take this seriously right out of the gate. I'm out of time. I'm sorry to talk about Chapter 30, An Ancient Treasure. But what it comes down to is there is a sword and a set of necromancer bells. And Clariel is urged to take up both. and she takes the sword, but she refuses to pick up the bells. And the push, like she says, I don't want to make it more difficult to regain the charter. And Mogget starts to say it won't make it, and then the marks glow on his collar, and he says it'll only make it a little worse, and you really need all the help you can get, and keeps pushing her. And eventually, when she refuses to do a thing, he tells her, if you keep showing weakness, they're going to turn on you. And she's like, the fuck you mean they're going to turn on me? You told me that wasn't even a possibility as long as I made them swear to me when I was still strong. And he is like, I mean, no, maybe I lied. And she's like, oh, you fuck. She gets so mad. It's the kind of thing that, like, I could see her very nearly picking Mogget up and snapping him, but, she can't because probably Mogget does have some protections. And she has to reassert her dominance over these two creatures a couple times because they sort of like just nod to her at one point when she's like, you serve me though, right? And it's not enough. And she stares them down until they like really bow. And it's one of those moments of like, if you have to do that, that means that people don't really mean it. If you have to really force it out of them. And I imagine with these creatures, it's a similar situation. And when she says that she won't pick them up, Mogget says, as she walks away, not yet, but I know a necromancer when I see one. He patted after her, his pink tongue out a fraction, listening in satisfaction as she called out forcefully to her servants. And that is the end of the chapter. So, we've only got another 2 chapters. Is it really just that? I ran out of time though, so I'm not sorry. I might have been able to cram those in here, but I don't think that would be good. So, God, the next episode though is the end of this book. Oh my God. It always sneaks up on me. All right, I'm out of time. I gotta go. Thank you so much, Yama, for commissioning this. Thank you, everybody who is listening. I'm sorry to those of you. I know that Abby and Ashley and there is another person, and forgive me, I'm forgetting, who often come to the live reads, but now that they're at night with the time difference, they can't, and it's a bummer. I miss you guys, but hopefully you're enjoying listening, and maybe you'll be able to come to some at some point once things go back to normal if I have these during the day again. Until then, guys, I'll be seeing you soon with a new episode. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.